Hello, Extratime.
They point to the league not to get a high because it damages your reputation. It makes people, when they read it, just laugh at you.
The single club, they're playing in the League of Ireland, they're playing in the Europa League, and they're credit the game in this country. Maybe we should get Stephen Kenny then to manage the Irish team.
Hello everyone, and you're all very welcome along to another episode of the Extratime.com podcast. It's Dónal Ryan in the hot seat this week, filling in for Luke Jordan, and I'm joined as always by Oisin Langan. Oisin, thanks for joining us.
That's no problem.
So just to quickly run through the results from last Friday in Weavers Park, it finished Drogheda United 2, Derry City 2, Dundalk 0, St Patrick's Athletic 0, Shelbourne with their first defeat of the season in Talca Park. Shelbourne 1, Bohemians 2, the score there. A scoreless draw in the RSC between Waterford and Galway United 0 all there. And in Tallaght Stadium it finished Shamrock Rovers 3, Sligo Rovers 0. Oisin, were you at any of the games this week?
I watched St Pat's and Dundalk because we had it live on the St Pat's app on the watch along, and we've got live coverage of every game this season. So if you're doing something that means you can't watch a game, you can listen to it with us. So I watched it for that on Friday night. And on Monday, I watched Dundalk against Bohemians. Bohemians against Dundalk. So I watched two games in full. Didn't get to a game. We'll get to a game this Friday night, obviously, because St. Pat's have Waterford at home, and I'll be doing that for LOI TV. So I'm fully aware of what went on, and I watched two games in full. And it was an interesting couple of days.
Certainly was an interesting couple of days. I was in Tallaght Stadium myself to see Shamrock Rovers breeze past Sligo Rovers, the only way of putting it. We'll get on to that in just a minute. But I suppose, Oisin, one of the big results from last Friday was in Talca Park. Shelbourne 1, Bohemians 2. Shells fallen to their first defeat of the season.
Yeah, look, there's nothing wrong with that. The best teams get beaten. Manchester City sometimes get beaten. Barcelona at their pomp occasionally, or when they were at their pomp, as we saw last night in the Champions League. They're certainly not at that anymore. By the way, I think Xavi made major errors even when they went down to 10 men. Like leaving Lewandowski on when he is not a man to stretch defences or hold the ball up despite his physical size. Anyway, that's a different debate and a different argument. I saw Damien Duff after the game saying they were the better team. And I like Damien Duff. I think he brings an awful lot to the League of Ireland. I do think some media outlets obsess on him. But I understand that. He's a legend of Irish football, and he's kind of... He really is one of us. He really is a League of Ireland person in the sense that he's kind of crazy. And I mean that as a compliment. But he said after the game that, and I don't want to misquote him, but I think he said that they played the better stuff or they were the better team at times. Well, there's only one way to tell who is the better team, and that's looking at the scoreboard at full time. And people will accuse you of scoreboard journalism. But like, if that isn't the case, then why do we have scoreboards? So Bulls won the game. So Bulls were the better team on the night. Played it well. Soaked up what Shells had to throw at them. But I think it's a blip rather than a slump for Shells. It's quite the test this weekend over the 4 days for them. But a test that I think they can pass. But like Bowes kind of did to Shells what Shells had been doing to teams over the last couple of years. And again, this is a compliment, by the way. This is not me slagging off Shells, because football is not just one thing. Football is not just about flair, and football is not just about attacking and entertaining. And we'd love all teams to be able to do that. But football is about defending and saying, well, you have to find a way to beat us if we're relatively defensive. And Bulls did that to Shells, and Shells couldn't find a way. Now they very well might. If they met the next day, who knows, they might have. But that, again, is not the way football works. But it was a great weekend for Bulls. They got that 1-0 win against Dundalk on Monday night. They weren't spectacular, but they looked like they had a very good shape to them. They took the chance when it came, and they had to make 6 changes, which is quite the turnaround. And they weren't spectacular. And Dundalk might argue that they could have got a point out of the game, and they could have. But Bulls with 6 points over 2 games, quite the result for them. But look, from the Shelbourne point of view, they were always going to lose a match at some stage. So I wouldn't be overly worried if I was a Shells fan.
No, and just I suppose, Oisin, while we're talking about Shells, a lot has been made of the decision ahead of their game this Friday away to Galway United to ban away fans travelling. Now it's come out this afternoon. Dan McDonald reporting that a full stadium ban had been mooted for Shelburne with their home clash against Shamrock Rovers, which is due to be a televised game, I understand. But following an appeal, it was then reduced rather to the away fans being banned for this weekend's trip to Galway United. So I suppose your initial reaction to that.
Well, I don't understand these banning of away fan punishments because it only punishes the home club, and I appreciate that is a highly unoriginal argument. And you do have to punish clubs, but I don't think that's the right way. I think a full stadium ban when you're playing at home for the home team, maybe you can let the away supporters in, is possibly the way to go, because I do think the punishment for pyro and certainly throwing pyro at officials, regardless of the age of person and regardless of who does it, has to be draconian and has to be severe because the message has to go across. And Donal, I appreciate I'll sound like a pearl clutcher here, but like pyro, that whole thing has to stop. It's dangerous. And how someone has been not more seriously injured up to now, I don't know. Because I've stood beside people who set off flares, and you do feel the burn, and you do see people getting burns on clothes and things like that. And Cian Byrne got injured. Dermot Broughton needed medical treatment. So people have got injured. So it has to be dealt with. And as has been pointed out, you can't do a safe pyro because pyro just isn't legal in this country. So maybe, if League of Ireland fans are that passionate about it, maybe we can lobby, because that's democracy. That's how it works. You can lobby for things. So maybe we can make it so that safe pyro comes to being, and there's enough politicians who follow the league and who are into the league and who are jumping on the league, some of it genuine, some of it for their own purposes, who maybe we can get to write some legislation or help us out with this. But as it stands, the pyro thing is an issue and it has to stop. I think though that I just think the OA punishment only punishes the club who are receiving, the team who are supposedly being punished. The full stadium ban, yeah, I think that's a good way to do it. But I think you can be sensible about it, and I don't think there's any harm in saying, the FAI saying, or the league saying, okay, we're not going to impose the ban for this because that game's on telly and we need to show off our product. That's actually fair enough. All games are on telly, but terrestrial telly is another level altogether to LOI TV. So I think the punishments are wrong at the moment. But look, it from the league's point of view, no matter what they do, people are going to have a go at them. But I do think that the punishing of away fans, the punishing of the home clubs by not allowing away fans is wrong. And there are people who will say, well, you should be able to set out your allocation. Certain clubs can, certain clubs just don't have the numbers of followers. So why should they lose out on something they would have budgeted for? And you would, from a Galway point of view, I can't speak for them, but I imagine they'd have looked at this season and said, well, when are we going to get big crowds? We're probably going to get a big crowd when Shamrock Rovers visit us, when Shelburne, any of the Dublin clubs really. And look, probably Sligo Rovers as well, because you wouldn't have that far to travel. Although people, I think Dubs sometimes forget how far apart Sligo and Galway are. I remember someone in a previous workplace saying to me, hey, listen, can you just pop up to Sligo while you're in Galway to do this interview, thinking it would take me like 10 minutes, But yeah, look, well, listen, that happens. But yeah, I think this is the wrong punishment to effectively punish Galway for it.
The way I look at it, Oisin, it seems like, it certainly feels like, whether this is the case or not, that the FAI are nearly afraid to issue a full stadium ban to anyone. I mean, when we go back a couple of years to see Shamrock Rovers were due to be heavily punished for letting off fireworks in the stand at the RSC a couple of years ago.
Yeah.
That was reduced to just a fine. People have been calling for stadium bans as the only way to kind of stamp out these pyro issues that just seem to keep cropping up, especially since the start of this season. But like I said, it almost feels like the FAI are afraid to take that one step further.
And I don't blame them, Donald, because it's a big decision to make. It's a tough decision to make. And no matter what the FAI or the league do, they're wrong. Someone's going to say you're wrong. And the people who argue you're wrong are utterly convinced that they're right. And when they overturned the Rovers thing, the Shamrock Rovers ban, I think they weakened their position. And you have to keep in mind how horrific that situation was, where fireworks were fired towards the pitch. And I remember when that happened being really angry, not because it was Shamrock Rovers fans, but because someone did that at a football game. And like the people who did that, I don't know that anything actually happened to the individuals who did that. I don't know, and I don't want to comment or speculate in case there's legal issues or a case still to come or whatever. But that was so egregious. That deserved a full stadium ban. And it's harsh on the thousands upon thousands of Shamrock Rovers fans who are grand, you know, who just are like most football fans. They just want to go and watch their team and whatever. And I'm sure there were very good reasons for the full stadium ban being overturned. Maybe there was, and again, this is me speculating. I don't know what happened. Maybe season tickers sick. Maybe there was an issue that season ticket holders could demand a refund. You know, maybe they could say, well, it's not our fault we can't go to that game. We want to be refunded for that individual game. I don't know. But it's a harsh punishment because you punish the vast majority of football fans who are grand, regardless of club.
Yeah, I agree.
And the people that the utter idiots who did that then get away with it effectively when they should be held responsible.
Yeah, but like it's a tough route to go down. But the FAI certainly kind of snooked themselves a little bit by not making an example out of that at the time, and you know, would have set down a serious precedent going forward.
Yeah, exactly. And look, Donal, I appreciate people think when I'm on this podcast, I'm kind of soft on the FAI in the league, and I don't quite get into the righteous indignation that you and Luke do. And look, cards on the table. It's possibly because I worked with a few of those people when I was doing the LOI TV show, and I know how much they genuinely care and love League of Ireland football and clubs. And I know that since these people have come into their jobs, League of Ireland clubs, by and large, would acknowledge that they are incredibly helpful and much better than previous regimes, and genuinely want the league to move forward and genuinely get the league. And like, and again, because he's the head guy, I'll name him. Mark Scanlon is very much one of those people. So like, I kind of don't like going into put it on them. But do I think they were wrong to overturn that stadium ban on Rovers? Yes, they were. And look, they may. You can correct me if I'm wrong. I have a horrendous memory on things like this. Maybe it has been explained why they did it, but I still think it was wrong, and they kind of weakened themselves by doing it. But look, I actually would have no problem if they came out and said, you know what, we got that wrong, but from here on in, it's full stadium bans. Because I think that's the only way to do it. And I actually think that would make them look stronger. Acknowledging that you've made a mistake and saying, look, this is what we have to do. We thought maybe people would cop on and not do this anymore, but they haven't. And look at the amount of situations there's been since. So we really have, like the behavior of people has not changed. So we have to now up at a level with the punishments.
Yeah.
So there I am slacking the FAI/League of Ireland at the same time defending them. But I actually genuinely think they wouldn't weaken themselves by saying, look, we let Rovers off. We thought people would stop. They haven't. So now it's, now we have to step it up.
Yeah. Sometimes you just got to call a spade. And it's worth noting as well that Shelburne set up a fundraiser for fans to buy virtual tickets to kind of an attempt to compensate Galway United for the loss of the gate that they're going to suffer on Friday night. Oisin, you touched on Bohs there as well, and of course they were in action on Monday night as well. They took on Dundalk. James Akintunde with the winner there, but by all accounts it seems like Dundalk are starting to get to grips with the pace of the league. Maybe a couple of games too late, but
they played well on Friday night against St. Pat. They were very solid. And they've got some nice players like Johnson, the defender. He looks decent. Shelby, although Barry Murphy questioned him on the goal in the Extratime.com League of Ireland Voice Notes podcast, which was released in the aftermath of Bohs and Dundalk, he looked a lot better. And in fairness to Barry, he did say, well, maybe the wind caught him and maybe there was a miscommunication with the defender. So he wasn't too hard on him. So Gullen is working hard. Maybe he will start to get goals and maybe, he'll score one and go on a run. Horgan and O'Kane looked dangerous on the wings. Anima Sahoon picked up a yellow card early on Monday night and got himself into a little bit of disciplinary trouble and had to be taken off at half-time. But Annesley came in and looked solid, looked okay. Owen Kenny came on and looked like really up for the fight, threw himself around a bit. I'd like to see more from him. But yeah, they've improved over the last couple of games, and people will say, well, maybe that's proof that Stephen O'Donnell wasn't the right man, and maybe that's proof that Stephen O'Donnell isn't a great manager. That is certainly not the case. Stephen O'Donnell will walk into another job, and he should, because he's an excellent coach. And I feel a great deal of sympathy for him, because he took a job that then changed radically by the time that job ended. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it wasn't the club
Like
that he went back to.
Yeah. Yeah, and by the way, like, performed a miracle to almost get them into Europe last season. And at half time on the last night of the season, it was looking like Dundalk were on their way back to Europe. And look, they just fell short. So look, Stevie's going to walk in somewhere else, and I hope he does, and I wish him well, because it's horrible to see any person lose their job. But maybe there's a bit of, sometimes you do need a change of voice, or the voice that was there, just people stop listening to it, and that happens in football. It happens in all employment and all jobs. And then when a new voice comes in, players respond. So it'll be interesting to see if they can sustain this little upsurge. Now, the worrying thing is we're saying an upsurge after, how many games have the new management team been in charge of now? Is it 2 or 3?
2, I believe.
2. Yeah. So decent against Pats on Friday night. Actually, is it 3? Were they in charge for the low draw against Drogheda? No, they weren't. Sorry, that was Stevie's last game, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Because then it was Pats. Yeah. Because I remember Pats fans saying, "Oh, you fired him before we got the chance to beat him," which I understand. That's rivalry and that's football, and the transition from Pats to Dundalk wasn't great from his point of view. But yeah. So like they need to start winning games, because you'd look at them and you'd say they've improved, but are they any better than what's ahead of them? Probably not at the moment. But you asked me about Bulls, so I'll talk to you about Bulls after giving you a 10-minute soliloquy about Dundalk. Yeah, look, I thought Akintunde brought something when he came on, launched himself at that very decent delivery. Keita was decent, and we had Rory Merriman on the podcast on Monday night, who was at the game, and he said that the fans really responded to him, and Alan Reynolds really responded they really responded to Alan Reynolds' instructions, because he talked about one-on-one defending and how that has to improve. He talked about that on Friday night, and they were much better at it on Monday, according to Rory. And I watched the game as well, and I thought they looked defensively solid, and they looked decent enough going forward. The wind kind of ruined the game. Like, it wasn't a particularly good game to watch, but I wouldn't blame the players for that, because the wind was very, very strong, and it just made it very, very difficult. But yeah, look, it's an exciting time for both, but the league is kind of weird in the sense that you could lose a game and find yourself in the relegation spots or near enough to them, and win a game and find yourself challenging for the title at the moment.
Yeah, it's very, the competitiveness rather of the league has really gone up a notch this season. And just briefly on the Dundalk, Oisin, before we move on to the next couple of games, you highlighted Jamie Gullen there working hard, and Owen Kenny, who came on off the bench for his league debut for Dundalk. Will the onus be on the likes of Jamie Gullen now to get the goals for Dundalk? I mean, they're turning in better performances now since O'Donnell has left, really, it has to be said. But the big question is where the goals are going to come from, really.
Well, firstly, it was interesting to see a release from Dundalk today. And I don't think I've ever seen a release like this, but I did like it, actually, from Peter Halpin in Dundalk FC. He said, the search for the manager is ongoing. Some names that have been mentioned are actually, that's accurate reporting. Some names that have been mentioned are not. And there are some names that haven't been mentioned anywhere, which I thought was an interesting update and a good update as well. That's really good to see the club communicating with their fans, because communicating is important. And saying nothing creates a vacuum and creates a nervousness. So even if you don't have a whole pile to say something, say what's going on, tell us what's happening. I noticed that Peter didn't say we'll be making an appointment at X date. He's probably learned a lesson from Mark Cannon there. Maybe don't specify a date and put yourself under pressure. But look, and Dan McDonnell of the Irish Independent and LOI Central observed this a couple of weeks ago, that maybe some of the players for Dundalk, were they signed for a relegation fight, or were they signed to play good and decent football? I think some of them in there at the moment could make good wartime players, and Gullen looks like one of those players. And Owen Kenny, he's a big lad, I think. so he could be one of those players as well. Um, and they have enough, Andy Boyle, Robbie Benson, Daryl Horgan, John Mountney. There's good steel and grit there as well, and a bit of determination. But there's a couple of players in there that you'd say if they get the best out of them, they have a chance here. Like Zach Johnson, really impressed by him. Paul Doyle is a player who can pick a pass and move around. So they have talent and they have the players to get them out of trouble. The trouble is you're looking at the other teams and thinking, well, there's not really much between these teams, like the teams who are going to be in relegation. I don't even want to name those teams at the moment, Don, because the league is so crazy that you could mention a team in the relegation chat, and next thing, all of a sudden, they're in third. It's madness. But yeah, I think if they get the right manager, they have enough quality to certainly challenge getting out of there. But as a Cork City fan, I've been hurt by this before, where you think we could be okay, and then you get relegated and you're just heartbroken.
Yeah, it's a slippery slope, all right. And of course, Dundalk still looking for that first win of the season. They'll be hoping to get back to winning ways in the showgrounds on Friday night when they travel up to Sligo to take on Sligo Rovers. Of course, Sligo Rovers will be looking to get back to winning ways themselves after losing 2 games in a row by 3-0 away as well. So they were in Tallaght Stadium on Friday night. I was there myself doing commentary for Oisin FM, and it really looks like Oisin Shamrock Rovers are starting to wake up.
They are, and when you look at some of the players they still have to bring back as well, Aaron McAniff, Faruja, Jack Byrne. And it was always going to be the case that they were going to click into gear. I nearly think, Dolan, we don't have to talk about Shamrock Rovers because everyone knows what's going to happen and everyone knows what they're going to do. It's about now whether or not a Derry, a Pat, a Bowes step up and match them stride for stride. Regards Sligo Rovers, they didn't particularly play well on the night. Like you were at the game, was it a case of, look, they were just outclassed and that happens at Tallaght, or were they fatigued looking? Did they just not play well? Did they look like a team who mentally weren't tuned in because they were like, well, we're going to be beaten here? What was their performance like? Can you take anything from it from the Sligo Rovers point of view?
Not really, Oisin, to be honest. I mean, like you said there, that's kind of sometimes that is what happens at Tallaght Stadium. Sligo Rovers just could not lay a glove on Shamrock Rovers from minute 1 to minute 90. They started off okay and not much to report in the way of chances, but as the first half grew on, Shamrock Rovers were just kind of knocking on the door and getting closer and closer and closer. And Graham Burke in particular really kind of stood up and took the game by the scruff of the neck, particularly in the first half. I mean, he was inches away from scoring his first goal of the season, only for J.R. Wilson, who was really well placed on the line and probably one of Rovers' better performers on the night, Sligo Rovers, that is, to block a shot off the line. But then Burke gets his first goal in spectacular fashion, just picked up the ball and drove towards the box and just rifled a shot into the top corner from about 25 yards, and decent angle as well. Nothing Ed McGinty could have done about it. And then that was compounded by a quick fire double from Aaron Green at the start of the second half. So you've about half an hour to play and you're chasing the game at 3-0, a game you're chasing already. Like, I don't think it was a case of Sligo Rovers playing particularly badly. It was more of a case of they weren't let play at all. And it has to be said, like, a decent contingent travelled up from Sligo as well, and it was painful viewing if you're from a Sligo Rovers background. But no, Shamrock Rovers would be very happy and very pleased with the performance that they've turned around. And like I put it there, it's like they're starting to wake up now and kind of dusting themselves down and ready for the league campaign ahead to go for their fifth one in a row. So it's like they're ready for it.
Yeah. Well, again, we can ignore Shamrock Rovers because we know what they're going to do. What about Sligo Rovers? Is it just me, and you can correct me if I'm wrong here, and there hasn't been too many games since Pineacker got the injury, but have they struggled since Pinacker's injury, and are they going to continue to struggle without Pineacker? Because their squad, their first 11 is decent, but their squad is fairly thin.
Well, that was the first game played since
was it okay?
Since he got injured, Oisin, because
yes, they have struggled without him.
The game against Galway United was called off due to the weather. That's been rescheduled for the Monday coming. So it's a big double header in the showgrounds coming up this weekend. But Charlie Wiggett was put in at centre back, which is his natural position. I didn't think he did too badly, given that it was his first time playing alongside Ollie Denham. Anytime he's featured really for Sligo Rovers, he's been filling in at right back, covering J.R. Wilson. when he hasn't been fit. I thought Wiggett did okay, but like I said, there was no real shining light for Sligo Rovers. So I think
Yeah.
this Friday now against Dundalk will be able to get a much bigger read of how well Wiggett is going to slot in there and how Sligo Rovers are going to bounce back because, as you mentioned there, a couple of games to win will send you right up the table, and Sligo Rovers were benefactors of that in the early stages of the season,
Yeah.
putting a good run of results together. But when you look at the teams you'd expect to be in around the bottom half of the
Yeah.
table now, your Galways, your Waterfords, Dundalk, Strahdas, and Sligo Rovers will be in that mix for the bottom half as well. More than likely, they'll be the ones that are that they'll be hoping to take the points off. So, as I said, huge double header coming up in the showgrounds this weekend with Dundalk on Friday and Galway making the trip up to the northwest on Monday.
And you'd nearly forgive them for the losses to St. Pat's away, especially that being the second game of a 4-day weekend and both of them were away. And then you'd forgive them obviously for the loss at Tallaght because it's Shamrock Rovers. It's Shamrock Rovers. It's just what they do. This is a huge one against Dundalk because they can really put the boot on the face of Dundalk with the win here.
Yeah, and like just put the boot in the faces right as they did in Oriel Park earlier in the season when I think that was the real that's what really drew everyone's attention to Dundalk and how badly off the pace they were when Sligo Rovers, who had been tipped by almost everybody to be in the bottom two this year, went up and put four past them in the first half, and of course it
Yeah.
finished 5-0. But yeah, it's like I said, it's these are the games that both teams will be eyeing up to win. And I'd say Dundalk now we're starting to get a little bit of wind in their sails. Will be really looking forward to the game on Friday night.
And is it a case that, and again, this is a bit of a cliche I've heard around Sligo Rovers, that Sligo Rovers have to really do it early in the season because they're going to lose a couple of players in the summer. And of course, sorry, I mentioned Pineacker being out. McGinty is out as well, isn't he?
No, McGinty's back. He played on
Oh,
Friday
he's
night,
okay. Is he
so
okay? Did he play on Friday? Okay, sorry. I didn't see the game at all.
he's back. He's back. He would have missed. He would have been in contention for the Galway game, all right, but touch and go. But he
Yeah.
was back and he was all right. Even though he did take a serious clatter off the post at one stage in the second half as well. So
Yeah. Okay.
he's a tough lad. But yeah, I mean that's all the talk as well. I mean Max Mata's loan spell is going to end quite soon. McGinty's due to go back to Oxford as well in the summer. Ollie Denham was signed on loan until June, but as far as I'm aware, his contract expires in the summer anyway, so
Okay.
he may be able to be held on to. So that was always the risk that you take with bringing players back
Yeah.
on loan for half of the season or whatever.
Yeah.
Get it done early, and of course there's still Simon Power to return as well. He's still banned from his red card down in Waterford, so he'll be missing for
Yeah.
Friday, but should make it
A-
back for the game against Galway
And
United.
and he's so important because he adds a bit of pace, and pace is, I won't say everything in this league, but it's so important. And if you can transition quickly from defending deep, then that's just such a weapon. And if you can do it with the kind of delivery and quality that Simon Power has, that's even better again. He could be a bit of a Shawnee Maguire for Sligo Rovers. And what I mean by that is a guy who is talented, who is at bigger clubs, but has come to this club with a lot to prove. And so far he does seem to be proving it. So far his attitude seems to be bang on.
Yeah, and he's been a big miss for Sligo Rovers as well. The games that he's been suspended for, I mean, they lost both of them, they lost both of them 3-0, whether that's down to the Rovers not really
Yeah.
having an outlet or, we've gone through that at length already, but no doubt he'll be a welcome return
Yeah.
to Sligo Rovers. And of course, he was sent off against Waterford that last time and down in the RSC, one of two scoreless draws, Oisin, to wrap up this part of the pod. In the last round of fixtures, Waterford 0, Galway 0, and Dundalk 0, St. Pat's 0 as well. Starting with Waterford and Galway. I suppose, as we mentioned, there'll be two teams will be looking to take points off each other at this stage of the season, Oisin, and just really cancelling each other out in the RSC on Friday night.
Do you know, I was on to Jonathan Higgins, who was on commentary for Galway Bay FM, because that was one game that I didn't have a voice note for the Voice Notes podcast. And I said, listen, was it as bad as the scoreline suggested? And he said, no, it's actually quite an entertaining game. And we're recording this podcast about 12 hours too early, Donald, because I'm watching that game back early tomorrow morning. I have a schedule to watch it back in preparation for the commentary on Friday night, because obviously I'm doing St. Pat's and Waterford. So I think Waterford will be happy enough with how they've started the season. Europe, is it a name for them? I don't know, but why not shoot for the stars and you might drop on the moon. One thing I do want to say about Waterford, and I've said this a couple of times, there isn't enough Waterford FC presence in the west of the county. So Waterford would be based in Waterford City, obviously. But then Dungarvan, which is about 20 miles away, maybe more, is a huge town in Waterford, and by Waterford standards. Well, it's the second biggest town in the county. And there's no real presence of Waterford FC there. Now, there is Waterford FC supporters, and there's a Facebook group, Western Blues and whatever. But I never felt the club made enough of an effort to drum up support from that side of the county. So I was really heartened to see posters in the local pubs saying, watch Waterford away games here. So on Friday night, around some of the pubs in Dungarvan, they'll be showing the Waterford match on LOI TV. They'll be showing, they'll be taking the LOI TV feed and showing it in the pubs, which is really cool, which is something I've never seen before in Dungarvan. Like, you walk past some pubs and it says, tonight, Champions League, Premier League, whatever, rugby. I've never once seen a Waterford FC versus X sign, but no, they're doing it this time, and they're doing it from this week, which is really, really good.
And of course, one of their own will be on commentary for St. Pat's, however.
Well, that's right. That's right. And well, look, the one thing, one of the many things I love about commentating on the St. Pat's games for LOI TV is that the instruction is very much, you're not the St. Pat's commentator, you're just the commentator. And in fairness, it was something when Jamie Moore, and I would be forever grateful to Jamie for giving me the shed to do the games. And it's a tremendous honour. But one thing he said to me, it was one thing I was going to say to him, but he actually preempted it and said it to me. Now, you're not the St. Pat's commentator, you're just a commentator. So you do this like you would do it if you were on Virgin, RTE, Sky, BBC. Now, I've only been on 3 of the 4 there. Yeah, no, actually all 4. But yeah, it's great. So I'll achieve my dream this Friday night, Dónal, of being in my local while at work, at simultaneously. kind of.
Best of luck with it, of course, Oisin. And then, of course, on to St. Pat's as well. 0-0 in Oriel Park last Friday as well. I suppose we mentioned them when they bet Sligo Rovers 3-0, and then it's, of course, good results following that too. But Pats were due to give someone a hiding around that time that they bet Sligo Rovers, and as often as Sligo Rovers were. But, the talk around St. Pat's has really changed of late, Oisin.
It has, and it doesn't take much to change things, only a win. It sounds silly, but they really only played badly during their mixed run, I'll call it, away to Waterford. And that's something that John Daly has said as well. Now, a 0-0 draw away to the bottom team doesn't seem like a good result. But when you consider that Dundalk would have had the change of manager bounce, not the new manager bounce, but the change of manager bounce, it was actually an all right result. And Melia adds a little bit of pace there. He's obviously brought in Bulger to start and Kavanagh to start and Nolan in starting games. And it's just added a bit more attack to the team. They did create chances against Dundalk, and it's a game they could have won because they had the better of what few chances were there. But they're now beginning to find their stride, and I think he's found his best team, John Daly. But you have to win pretty much most of your home games. And that win against Shamrock Rovers was such a huge deal, an unbelievably big deal. Of course, it and I've just about forgiven my dad for having his 80th birthday party that night, which meant I missed that game. And one of your boys from Sligo, Cathal Milani, got to do the game. And of course, Cathal being Cathal did a great job. But anyway, like that starts this week. Like they really have to, you have to beat everyone at home, whether they're above you or below you. So they have to get the win this week. But I would fancy them to do so. I think they have enough to beat Waterford, but Waterford are really, really decent. And they have a lot of pace in the team as well, especially with that Samoa breaking down the right-hand side. And in Podge Doyle, they've got a really fine striker who'll hold the ball up, who'll bring other players into it. He's not just about goals. Like, he's more of an all-rounded player than Erling Haaland. Is he better than Erling Haaland is obviously a different argument. But like, we were having this discussion last night, me and some of my buddies while watching the Champions League, that if Haaland doesn't score, what does he actually do for you? Whereas with Podge, he doesn't need to score. It's a big part of his game, obviously, being a striker, but he doesn't need to score to have a good game and to contribute positively. Now, Podge would be delighted with the comparison to Erling Haaland, and Haaland should be delighted with the comparison to Podge. Yeah, look what I could have egg on my face on the way back to Dungarvan after this game on Friday night. It's Waterford. Waterford are really decent, and they're capable of getting results against anyone. I think they'll probably learn their lesson. They probably have learned a lesson from that chastening against Derry a couple of weeks ago when they maybe left themselves a little bit exposed. That's what people who were at the game said to me anyway. And I don't think they'll leave themselves exposed. And one thing Pats maybe have struggled to do a little bit this season is break teams down. But I think they've tweaked enough and have found a way through. And, that option of bringing Forrester off the bench, not necessarily starting Forrester, is a really good option to have. Because if you know a team is going to sit deep, which most teams will when they come to Richmond Park, then you throw everything at them for an hour, 70 minutes. And when the game is a little bit stretched out and a little bit more open, you bring in Forrester, who just adds that bit more to attack. He can pick a pass. He can take on a shot himself. He'll make defenses think, and he'll certainly distract defenders. So, yeah, look, I'd fancy St. Pat's, but again, I wouldn't be going down the bookies and putting your life savings on it. But I wouldn't be going down the bookies anyway.
Certainly wouldn't be doing that with too many League of Ireland games anyway. Stranger things have certainly happened. Of course, Podge Hammond getting the glowing praise of Oisin rather than Podge Doyle there, as you said.
Sorry, did I say Podge Doyle?
yeah.
Why did I say Podge? Do you know what I've done? Do you know what I've done there? I've mixed Podge Hammond with Owen Doyle because they're very good friends.
Yeah, two of them going hand in hand in the careers they've had in Ireland and of course further afield. The only teams we haven't really touched on there are Derry City and Drogheda United. They of course played out a 2-2 draw in Weavers Park last week. We'll be delving deeper into that one with our next guest, Dee Curran. That's coming up just after this break.
Extratime.ie. Get in touch through Facebook or tweet us at Extratime News. League of Ireland football is our passion.
This is the Extratime.com podcast. It's Dónal Ryan still here with you, and I'm delighted now to be joined by Drive 105 match commentator for Derry City, Dee Curran. Dee, thanks very much for joining us this evening.
No bother, Dónal. Hi, good evening, Dee. Anyway.
Yeah, absolutely. And like I said, thanks very much for coming on. I suppose only one place to start, really, Dee, and that was Weavers Park last Friday. Derry City with a 2-2 draw against Drogheda United. Drogheda side that are struggling really at the start of this League of Ireland season so far. Is that a poor result for Derry City, do you think, first and foremost?
It's a tight ground that Derry City don't like playing on, if I'm completely honest with you, Dónal. Historically, even though we're undefeated down there, we don't often come away with 3 points. Last year, we walked away with a 1-0 win thanks to an Adam O'Reilly goal. But this time around, we started off really, really poor. And then played 35 minutes of great football, taking us up to half time, and it was topped off by a fantastic goal by Will Patchen. Second half had a little bit of a spell where we did play really well, and when we came in, had an opportunity that came off the woodwork, but Drogheda started making changes throughout the game, started changing their shape. Whenever they went into half time, they had 2 players that had to go off injured, so they were forced into making some substitutions. But at half time, it seemed that Kevin Doherty had taken stock of what happened, rearranged a few things on the pitch, and Drogheda went for it. They had no choice but to go for it. And we seen that with Shelbourne the week before with Drogheda, that they have absolutely no fear, and they're willing. They go with teams at home as long as they feel they have a chance. And the chance arose. Personally, I would say, and it has been a common issue, Dónal, with Derry City this season, the goals that we have conceded, it's not been in moments that we've been torn apart. It's been in moments that we have created the problems upon ourselves. You just got to look at other games like the Bohemians game, for example, where they lost 2-1. Even against Dundalk the week prior, we played in Ryan O'Kane for his goal. And we also were at fault for the goal at Galway. Initially, they punished us. They took advantage of just a lapse of concentration, and that's what happens quite a lot. But down at Weavers Park, a lot of Derry fans had pointed the finger at Ronan Boyce and said that he was at fault. But the truth is, Ronan Boyce for the first one was in the position that he should have been in. But when Markey came under the 18-yard box, both centre backs pushed in. They would move towards him instead of holding their position, and that's what opened up the opportunity for Warren Davis. They score his goal. I think that a lot of Derry fans, though, coming out of that game have looked at it and said, "Yep, Drogheda, second from bottom. Haven't really looked at how Drogheda are improving and how they've been playing throughout the season, but it is a game that they were expecting to win and have been very, very critical of how Rory Higgins has managed that fixture amongst some of the other ones, not including the Dundalk game in which we won 4 goals to 1.
Well, Drogheda have been a tricky side for a lot of League of Ireland teams, especially last year. I think they were probably one of the surprise packages of the season last year. Now they haven't really been able to, I suppose, rediscover that kind of form at the beginning of this season. But with a 2-2 draw in Weavers Park against Derry City, I mean, it's a good enough result for the Drogs. But just from a Derry point of view as well, there does seem to be a little bit of unrest around the club, whether Derry are performing to the level that they should be at, given the caliber of player that's been signed. But when you look at the table, I mean, there's joint second on 16 points with a pretty decent goal difference as well. So is it really that bad?
It's crazy to think that Bohemians let their manager go and they're joint second. You know, this is how congested this league is. Normally we see a point where teams start to split. You'll see the people going for the title. You have that middle section and those who are going to be in the bottom 2 or 3. At the moment, the only thing that looks certain is that Dundalk are going to be in that bottom 2 unless things drastically change, depending on who the new man is, depending on what the policies are for bringing in players in the summer. We're yet to see that, and what's going to happen with the loan signees as well that may have to return to their parent club. So we know where they're going to go, but everybody else is still stacked and in a position where 2 games can turn the season. It can get you back either up challenging, or it can have you back in the bottom end of the table. Derry fans have been, like, they do acknowledge I have to acknowledge that there is the posts that you see online is not exactly a majority, but they are the most vocal. Those who are, upset or are taking the negatives out of it. I can see why they were upset about the Galway game. We just didn't show up and we didn't play at home. The Shelburne game, you're going to Tulka. You're taking on the team that's top of the table and are a very, very stubborn side, hard to shift. And we walked away with a point. Some would say that that's a good point. The Drogheda game, again, 2-1-1, didn't go for the jugular, didn't finish it off, walked away with a point. Our away form is what's letting down Derry City at the moment. At home, they've been very, very good, barring the Galway game. They may start the first half a bit rusty, where they're not at their tempo, but in the second half, they lift that tempo, they make the changes, they go for the victory. And that has worked, all barring the Galway game, as I mentioned. But I think coming into this fixture with Shamrock Rovers, I know I've talked about the minority and how unhappy they are, but the majority are like, right, I think we're in for a piston here on Friday. There is an absolute fear factor amongst the Derry City supporters, and only a minority are actually saying, I think we can do something here.
What do you think yourself?
I think it's going to be a draw. And to be honest with you, I would almost take it. To be honest, it's like the way things are going. You'll probably hear the press conference whenever it comes out tomorrow morning, and being Thursday, of course. Rory Higgins made a point of mentioning certain players coming back or coming close to coming back, and it's a couple of players that you really need to see, because the midfield is an area in the park at the moment that I feel that we are not at our strongest. Patrick McElhinney has been injured for the majority of the season. He's played a very, very small part in the odd game. He's had a lot of bad luck with injuries over the last couple of years, and when he's playing or he's fit, he's the first name in the sheet. The second name then is Cameron Dummigan. He got injured in Sligo. We thought it was a worse break than it actually was, but he came back and Dundalk got injured during that game. So he's got to restart that recovery process again. Diallo, he got injured in pre-season and he was forecasted to be out for 3 months. So there's 3 very, very good midfielders that can hold the midfield and can stand face-to-face against anybody in the league. And we're kind of missing that, and we've had to change our shape. So Will Patching has had to come further back in the midfield and drop deeper to fill in that Patrick McElhinney role. Adam O'Reilly does a lot of running in midfield and tries to get things going. And then the third player we haven't settled on yet. We've had Aaron McAneff in there, and he's come very, very deep, and it's not his game. He's an attacking-minded footballer. He can't do the defensive side of things. So it has been quite difficult for him. And whenever you're facing a team like Shamrock Rovers, I know they're missing quite a lot of players, but no matter who they put in that midfield, it's going to be strong. It is going to be a player that if they smell or get any whiff of a weakness, they're going to take full advantage of it and they're just going to overrun you.
Yeah, I was in Tallaght Stadium myself there last Friday for doing commentary myself on Shamrock Rovers versus Sligo Rovers, and it really looks like, we discussed it earlier with Oisin as well, that the Shamrock Rovers have kind of gotten the better of that slow start that they traditionally have at the start of a League of Ireland season, and that they're really kind of ramping up the challenge to try and get back into that top bracket of the table, as you described it yourself, Dee. So I suppose a saving grace for Derry City this Friday really is that the game is in the Brandywell, which should play into the home side's advantage.
It should indeed. And in fairness, we haven't really had a fantastic record against Rovers in the Brandywell, barring the 2 victories in 2022 at the Brandywell, which were fantastic events. The cup game, probably more so, because it's the first time I've ever seen us play Rovers. Well, not the first time ever, but first time in a long, long time, where we dominated against Rovers and actually walked away with a victory. In Tallaght in the past, we've gone down there, played some of our best football, and have come away with less than what we thought we deserved. I think having it in the Brandywell is going to be excellent. It's already sold out. There was tickets that were put out in outlets that weren't done online on Saturday morning, and they were gone within minutes, because that's where the interest is. A lot of Derry City fans, as much as they moan and they groan, they hate they miss a game. They hate they miss a game against Shamrock Rovers, and they're going to bring a massive atmosphere with them. And this is the first time too, you made comment on this to someone this morning, that because of the restrictions on the away supporters for this fixture, because of the work that's going on behind the net, I think Shamrock Rovers were only given 150 tickets, which is one of the smallest Shamrock Rovers travelling support that I've seen in the Brandywell in their successful era. Whenever they weren't playing very well, you'd have been lucky to get 100, 150. But I reckon if they had the opportunity, they could have brought 200, 300, 400, and it would have created a completely different atmosphere. So that's going to be a disadvantage the Shamrock Rovers coming into this fixture. So the Brandywell has got to come alive, and it's got to, from minute one, just drown out any noise that's going to come from Rovers and just become intimidating for the 11 men that's on the pitch and in the hoops.
And the Brandywell has lived up to that standard, I suppose, in that, it can be an awful difficult place for teams to go. I mean, you can take issues with the pitch into account there as well, but from where I'm coming from on this particular point is the fans making it a really difficult place for the opposition. With the work that's going on, as you mentioned, behind the goals there, and the away stand being limited, obviously it's a pain for the away fans, but has it taken away from the atmosphere in the Brandywell a bit this season, do you think?
Dundalk went to the main stand for their allocation, and they sat up next to Block K, Block J, where all the noise normally gets generated from. And there was a nice to and fro between both sides. But in previous games, the Galway game and the St. Patrick's Athletic game in particular, the away fans were on the terrace at the side of the Mark Farn stand over towards the left-hand side as you look out onto the pitch. And it did take away from the atmosphere a little bit, admittedly, in the St. Patrick's Athletic game, because RT were up, we were moved to the far side. So we couldn't hear anything coming from the Pats end except for the bell. With the guy that's always sitting in there. I'll say nothing more about that. And that was the only noise that you can really see or hear, sorry. The Galway fans, you could hear a little bit whenever we were in the Mark Farn stand. They came with only 75. And I was talking to I was talking to Paul Corcoran, from Extratime, and he was saying that getting 75 from Galway up to the Brandywell was astonishing because they aren't a big travelling pack. But it has definitely changed the atmosphere quite a lot, the limited numbers. And this is the first game you're really going to see it. And I reckon a lot of Derry fans will come out of going, that was great, but you kind of miss that back and forth with the guys from Shamrock Rovers.
One of the players you mentioned there, Dee, was Will Patching. You mentioned he's kind of been, due to the injuries faced by Derry City so far this season, he's kind of been reshuffled, dropping into a little bit of a deeper role. Do you think that, we've seen him score some great goals already this year, but do you think that Rory Higgins is getting the best out of him?
I would personally like to see him pushed a bit further forward. That's a personal preference because he can link up the play between the midfield and the centre forward. We're trying to do it with Paul McMullen at the moment, but I think Paul McMullen is better suited in the right wing because of his directness. When he receives the ball, he has two things in mind. One, get away from the man in front of me And two, as soon as I do, get the ball straight in the 18-yard box. At least with patching going forward, he can hold it up. He can look for the passing option, and off he goes. We saw against Drogheda last week that if you give him an inch, he'll take a mile, and he'll absolutely punish you for it. And at least whenever he's further forward, you know that that's going to come. As he's sitting in that holding midfield role, he is on the left-hand side of the midfield. He's always in front of the halfway line, and he's looking around for a pass to go forward, and it normally goes sideways or backwards, but you need him in there in the middle for that forward pass. They turn and make it all happen.
Absolutely, yeah. And I suppose when you're looking at squads having to be reshuffled, and I'm sure people listening may be saying, well, Derry have one of the biggest squads in the league, but injuries are something that every team has to deal with, really.
Well, the busiest man in Derry City at the minute is Michael Higgerty, the physio, because you could make an injury 11 at the minute. There were so many bodies out, and obviously Collie Whelan has been a long-term one. Kieran Harkin has been a long-term one, but he's coming through in the reserves now in the under-20s league, and he's been seeing out 90 minutes now, which is a great progression for Jackie. And I had mentioned earlier that Diallo had been missing. We've been missing Dummigan throughout the season. Hubin is now one of those that's missing, but they're hoping that they can get him back sooner rather than later. We haven't really had much of an update as a time frame and how serious his quad injury is, and I am assuming it is a quad injury, because you're missing those goals. Because we talked about it, and I'm sure you talked about it last season too, that Derry had Jamie McGonigal, they had Danny McMullen, and they weren't getting the goals that Derry City needed. It was 4 apiece between those two players alone that I mentioned, and they were trying to get into positions, but they just weren't brave enough. They just weren't able to convert at the level of Patrick Hubin. Now, Patrick Hubin's playing the exact same tactics, but he's creating his own chances. He's bringing other players in. And we've missed that the last couple of games. And I actually think that things would have been a little bit different in Drogheda last week if you had Hubin in there, because he's in there in the middle. He's lurking. He's trying to see who he can bring in, how he can get into the 18-yard box. And one touch is all he needs to wrap a game up.
Yeah, Derry City certainly solved that issue you mentioned of not putting their chances away, or not creating enough chances, by bringing in Patrick Hubin. And with him as the top scorer in the league, I mean, there's no better available striker really to bring in, but with 6 goals as well, he's really kind of proven his worth, and it just shows with Dundalk's struggles how big a mistake it was to let him go. But I'm sure everyone up in Derry's neck of the woods won't be too concerned about that.
We weren't at all. We were more concerned about how long it was drawn out, because it was a foregone conclusion at one point, and then rumblings were happening in the background of Dundalk, and eventually the fee was paid. It was just so long getting it sorted out, and we all started to panic that it wasn't going to happen at all, despite the fact he was telling people he wanted to go, and he was going, and he was interested and visited the city and everything. And it's nice to know that you've got a centre forward, like you say, top goal scorer, 6 goals, and he's been top goal scorer all during this period that he's been missing too. Most of the main centre forwards haven't got kicking just yet. Like if you look at Shamrock Rovers, Aaron Green is now their top goal scorer. Last year, I don't think anybody would have expected Aaron Green to have banged in 4 goals, because he was very rarely getting on for Rovers at the time. But he has been there. He's actually been like a cheerleader anytime I've seen him on the bench, getting the guys going, always showing his support. And it looks like he has been rejuvenated in this Rovers team at the moment. And you were there last week in Tala. You seen the 2 goals he scored, 2 very, very good, well worked goals for Shamrock Rovers. They on their way to victory. So a good centre forward is difficult to find in this league, and we've found it over the last couple of years. And as good as Rory Gaffney is, and I am a big fan of Rory Gaffney, he is not your 20 goal a season striker, but he is someone that will get you 10 and set up 15 along the way. And Derry didn't even have that last year out of 3 players.
So injuries aside, Steve, where are the holes in this Derry City squad? Like, what are the problems that need addressing, do you think?
Defensive errors, they're all brought upon ourselves. I talked about already what happened down in Weavers, but there has been times where we're playing passbacks and we're not aware of the space, we're not aware who is around us, and we're not communicating that as a team. When we are shuffling the squad too, we are putting players like Cameron McJanet at left back, who is our best centre back, and bringing in Shane or Sam Todd. both defenders are very, very good. But if you're picking the team yourself, if we're, say, for example, we're playing fantasy football or we're playing Football Manager and we're picking the sides ourselves, we're having Cameron McJanet in centre back almost immediately. The Kieran Cole was there on the bench. I don't know why he didn't choose Kieran Cole, but Kieran Cole's played the last couple of games and has brought a much better balance to Derry City, particularly when they are breaking from the wing back position. So he and Ronan Boyce complement each other at either side of the pitch, and the centre backs are well protected. But whenever we start changing things around, like we did in Drogheda, where we put three at the back and then tried a wing back system, it created holes and it created difficulties, particularly as the midfield just weren't dealing with Oisin Gallagher and Gary Deacon in the second half. So trying to keep our shape, trying to keep the right personnel in that shape, and our concentration in defence when we're in possession, and we need to do a little bit better and be more aware of what's going on in front of us.
Of course, every team has their struggles, and I think it was a fair point you made, Dee, there as well, about a lot of people that are making noise on social media about the team being under pressure. Maybe a minority. I think a lot of clubs can probably relate to that as well. But as I mentioned, when you have the top scorer in the league and you're sitting joint second, 5 points off the top as well, the final question has to be, is Rory Higgins really under pressure?
Derry fans have been clinging to the line that came out before his first full season, and that was that he had a 3-year plan. And they're looking at this third year. Those who are grumbling are looking at this. And I agree. I hate this expression of a 3-year plan. I remember that Billy Davis did it at Derby County. He says he was going to get them up within 3 seasons, got them up in his first go and panicked, and even went on TV straight after and said, I wish I'd have done this with Preston, and then it got him into a lot of trouble. I think when you give yourself a timetable like that and you make that kind of declaration, supporters don't forget. Supporters keep that in the back of their mind, and they're always thinking, well, you said there was going to be a 3-year plan. And whenever things were going bad, it was used as a defence for Rory Higgins by supporters. Oh, but he has a plan. It's coming. It's, we're going to see how it plays out. He's building a squad. He'll have his own team and he'll do it. But now people have turned that round again and said, you told me this was going to happen. We need this. But see, in terms of around the club and with the chairman, there's no issue there at all. The chairman is more than happy to have Rory Higgins in charge. He's a very, very understanding chairman, is Philip O'Doherty, and he will, if Rory wants anything, he'll back him. He said, no bother, I'll give you this resource, whatever resource you need, and you manage the team how you manage. But some will also point out that he's been given the job and he has to deliver a league for Philip. Whether Philip wants it this year or next year, Philip will give him the opportunity to do it until he thinks maybe this isn't the man to do it. But he's not a second chairman. He's been forced into the Roddy Collins sacking, no doubt about that, because of his relationship with the media. And then Declan Devine was let go to bring in Rory Higgins. But I can't think of any other one where it was not mutual or harmonious. Maybe Peter Hutton's, but Kenny Shields and even Roddy Collins talking about how friendly the conversations were whenever he was being let go, and always described Philip as one of the best chairmen that he's ever dealt with in the league.
Well, there you go. The words of Dee Curran there. Dee, thanks very much for coming on and joining us on the Extratime.com podcast this evening.
No bother. Thank you, Donal. Appreciate it.
No problem at all. And of course, a huge game for Derry City in the Brandywell this Friday. They host Shamrock Rovers. That one's live on RTE2. And a quick look at the other fixtures just before we wrap up this evening. Bohemians take on Drogheda United in Dalymount Park. Galway United host Shelbourne. It's St. Pat's versus Waterford. And then Sligo Rovers welcome Dundalk to the showgrounds. That's the first of a doubleheader in the showgrounds this weekend, as Galway also make the trip to Sligo on Monday for the rescheduled Connacht derby that was called off previously because of the weather. Those are all on Friday night at 9:45 or at 7:45 rather, with the exception of Sligo Rovers and Galway. That's on Monday night at 7:45. In the first division on Friday night, it's Bray Wanderers versus Treaty United, Cove Ramblers versus Finn Harps, Kerry welcome Athlone Town, and Wexford host UCD. That's Friday night at 7:45. And then one game in the first division on Saturday evening as well at 7:30. It's Longford Town versus league leaders Cork City. And also on Saturday, it's the return of the Avenir Sports Women's All-Ireland Cup. In Group A, it's Linfield versus Bows. Group B sees Shelbourne versus Cork City and Wexford versus Cliftonville. Group C is Shamrock Rovers versus DLR. And Group D is Galway United versus Glentoran and Athlone Town versus Sligo Rovers. And 2 games in that competition on Sunday as well. In Group A, it's Lisburn versus Peamount United. And in Group C, it's Crusaders Strikers versus Treaty United. That's our lot for this week. Thanks very much for listening to us on the Extratime.com podcast. Big thanks to Dee Curran for joining us and to Oisin Langan earlier on. And from myself, Dónal Ryan, thanks for tuning in, folks, and we'll be back again next week.